Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm your host, of course, JT, and we are back with another fantastic episode. We have with us as a guest Paul Riegle, and Paul Riegle is the Chief Product Officer of Algorand. So I'm super excited to have this show, and for everyone tuning in, please leave your questions, comments in the discussion chat. I will certainly be checking those out, and hopefully by the end of the episode, we will get to any questions that you have. So without further ado, let me just introduce to the channel Paul Riegle. How you doing, Paul?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you, JT?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, not a problem at all. So, how about we get started with just a quick introduction? Tell the audience who you are, how you got into the space, and how you began working with Algorand.
Yeah, for sure. So, Paul Riegle, I'm the Chief Product Officer at Algorand. And I got into the space sort of not as an original true believer. So, when I came into the space, I was coming out of cybersecurity. I was looking for something that I felt like had either the same impact, could have the same impact on the world, or something that might in the future. And blockchain and crypto. This was 2018, mid 18, so I'd already missed at least one cycle. And it seemed like, hey, even if it doesn't take over the world, which hopefully it does, it seemed like it had the opportunity to really sort of disrupt major portions of how we operate. And so that was interesting enough for me to sort of get in. And of course, since then, I'm all the way down the rabbit hole with everybody else.
Makes complete sense. Sorry, something just fell in my background. I think it was one of my books, but that's all right. So, what sets
It
Algorand
was Carl
apart?
Sagan. It was your Carl Sagan book.
Oh man, you saw that. It was the Carl Sagan
Yeah.
book. I don't know if that's a bad omen or not. So, what sets Algorand apart from other blockchains?
Yeah, sure. So I think the answer here, the answer here is we shouldn't be talking about the blockchains. What sets us apart is the user experience for the applications that get built on top of Algorand. So things like the responsiveness to the user, things like transactions being final, which a user doesn't really understand until something gets reverted. And then they're like, wait, hold on a second. I thought I did something here. Or things like, you go to your application and it's just down because the blockchain in the background has gone down. So what sets us apart is all of those sort of user impacts that spring out of the underlying technology. But I'm on a mission to be talking about user experience for applications built on blockchain rather than the sort of characteristics of the underlying blockchain.
That's a fair enough. So one of the next upgrades will be to 10,000 TPS, transactions per second, and
Yep.
2.5 second finality. Is there a timeline as to when this is to be expected, and what have been some of the hurdles faced when working to implement this upgrade?
Yeah, so we do expect to see improvements live in the wild this quarter, and that's across TPS and the latency. We've been working really hard on this, and we're coming to the finish line here. In terms of some of the hurdles that we face, the challenges that we face, what's interesting about these improvements is like we're not changing the way our consensus algorithm works. There's no sort of like theoretical work that we have to do here. It's just hard systems work. So things like, well, if you're going to jam 10x the transactions through the system, you're going to use 10x the bandwidth. So how do we reduce bandwidth? You're going to have to do 10x the signature verifications. So the crypto ops. Well, how do we reduce that? We're going to have to store X amount of data. So it's just all the sort of system stuff. And how do you keep that speed that we're known for? How do you keep all the things that we're known for, but be able to increase the throughput of the system? So has it been hard? Yeah. But has it been sort of like theoretically hard? Not really. It's just hard work that we got to jam through. And we got a great team who's doing that. So shout out to those guys.
Yes, definitely a shout out to them. Now, after this 10K TPS upgrade, the next goal is 46,000. Will
Yes.
either of these upgrades require better hardware on behalf of the node operators?
Yeah, so certainly, if and when we go to the 46,000, we'll need to change the required specs for nodes. I would do want to say that that's not like an immediate next goal. Like, let's say we hit 10,000 TPS, 2.5 seconds. I'm not holding the meeting the next day like, okay, guys, up to 46.
Yeah.
And that's for a couple of reasons. We actually have the feature mostly done. It'll need some fix-ups after we finish up this performance increase. Feature's mostly done for pipelining blocks through consensus. But it does require sort of an improved node profile. And we're just not talking anything crazy. Like you can still run it on a nice laptop. You can still run it in standard cloud providers. But it is more than what we have now. And so the way I'm thinking about this and the way that we're thinking about this is we want to see this as more of a need from the community before we go through that sort of level of change. When we get to 10,000, that's a lot of capacity, and I'd like to see that sort of be used up and really get some progress there. And then when we need to, for sure, we've got it on the shelf. We can pull it out and do it. But I don't see a real need to really start pushing those numbers without the corresponding usage underneath.
And so for clarification, the 10K upgrade will not require any upgrade on behalf of the node operators, right?
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, they'll still need to run, the right number of cores and
Yep.
all the RAM and all that, but it's not a big increase there.
Perfect. And so this will lead me into the interoperability questions. What are state proofs and how do they work?
Yeah. So state proofs are seeking to solve the problem of bridging between blockchains. So if you think about how do you bridge an asset from one chain to the other, you're not actually picking it up and moving it. In almost all cases, you're sort of locking it up on one chain and then unlocking it on the other chain. In some cases, you're burning it, but usually it's sort of locked up. So you can think of it sort of like a collateralized asset. So you lock it up here, unlock it here, lock it here. Now I can get it over here. And you got to just kind of maintain the sync. The last thing you want is this, right? Because if you get this, all of a sudden you've got one asset, two places, you got a real problem. Okay, so what you're trying to do here is, how do I make that decision? How do I know, how does this blockchain know that it's locked up on this blockchain and vice versa? And there's a couple of ways to go about that. The easiest way is just to I don't know, JT, you tell me, right? Like just tell me when it's locked up over here, and then we'll all be safe over here because you're not going to lie to me. And in some cases, this is like a good strategy. For example, USDC does a bridge between all their different chains for USDC. And there's really no sort of trust model impact there because they already have control over that asset, right? They're the asset issuer. They can deny list, allow list, that kind of stuff. And so you might as well do a centralized bridge because often there are benefits to centralization. You can get a nicer user experience. You can own the user. You can do all sorts of things for them. But in a case where maybe that asset issuer doesn't have control or they're not the asset issuer, then what's the next step? I don't want to do the centralized thing. Okay, well, let me get a bunch of people together. So I'll get 10 people that I know and have good reputations because they're not going to lie to me. And there might be a good use case for that, but you might say, well, but what if one of them gets, subverted? Okay, great. I'm going to add in economic incentives. Anybody can join this group of people that's going to tell us whether or not we can unlock and lock. But if they say the wrong thing, they're going to get slashed and they got to bond some money. And you get into these ever increasing sort of complexities to try and say what the state is on the different blockchains. And so state proofs seek to eliminate that entirely or make those solutions trustless because in some cases it's like a multi-chain bridge. And so there's different ways they can hook into different chains. So what do state proofs actually do? State proofs, it's a proof where the blockchain effectively commits to the state of the blockchain at a particular block. It gets put into a cryptographic proof. It's signed by the online validators for Algorand. And then this proof is now portable and you can drop it into a smart contract on another chain. And from that smart contract, you can now verify whether or not transactions have occurred on Algorand from a separate chain. And so in terms of your trust model, you need someone to move the state proof. So for liveness, I need someone for liveness, but I don't need them for safety, right? Like they can't hand me a fake state proof, or they can, but I will know it's fake. And in that way, you sort of totally remove the trust between these two blockchains. If you trust the smart contract and the blockchain over here, and you trust the Algorand blockchain, that's all you need to trust. And I should hope you trust both blockchains that you're bridging between, or I'm not sure why you're bridging between them. And so it's this effort to really reduce the trust needed, because when you think about blockchains, it's sort of like the promise of blockchain is that you can operate in a completely trustless environment, but that's only true within a blockchain, and we want to make sure that that is true when you go elsewhere in the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure
a lot kind of rambly. Hopefully that was a reasonable explanation.
No, that's perfect. And I'm sure a lot of people in the space have been, quite aware of some of the criticisms Vitalik Buterin has given towards some of these decentralized bridges, or, some of them are actually pretty centralized anyway, but, they've been prone to a lot of DeFi hacks. So this is a very anticipated upgrade. Is there a timeline? Is there a specific timeline for when this feature will be implemented?
Yeah, for sure. So we released the keys. So we released a new key type on Algorand. It's a quantum resilient key type using the Falcon signature scheme. which is a quantum resilient scheme. We released that in a release, I want to say about a month ago at the end of Q1. And so if you are running a node and you're out there, please regenerate your participation keys. In this new state proof key will also be generated, and then you'll be ready to go. The next milestone is actually the code to create the state proofs. We expect to get that done in this quarter, in which case we'll push that out. It'll be a consensus release, and then the state proofs will automatically start being generated.
Now, is the ultimate goal with state proofs complete cross-chain functionality, and meaning could a dApp leverage state proofs to create a DEX to trade other assets like Luna or Solana through the Algorand blockchain?
Yeah, so to be super specific about what state proofs do, they allow Algorand state to be understood by I'll call them foreign blockchains, external other blockchains. It doesn't help Algorand understand other blockchains state. So what we would like to see, we'd love to see it become a standard where any proof of stake blockchain is generating state proofs or something similar that can be used in a similar way. And then for sure, it's a huge enabler of cross-chain, safe cross-chain bridging, and even can enable some safe cross-chain sort of DEXs or exchanges that live off-chain, but are entirely using state proofs from other chains.
Now, still sticking with the theme of interoperability, I know this is on the foundation side, but Applied Blockchain was recently awarded a grant to create what is called the London Bridge, a trustless bridge between Algorand and Ethereum. Do you have any insight to how far along this is?
I don't have insight there. I do know Adi and the team over at Applied Blockchain. It's a great team, and they do great work. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it. But I don't have an update there. As you said, that's on the foundation side.
That makes sense. And moving on to the Algorand virtual machine. What is the Algorand virtual machine, and what separates it apart from the Ethereum virtual machine?
Sure. Yeah. So the AVM, or the Algorand virtual machine, that's basically our smart contract engine. So that's what it's the execution environment. It's allocating storage and memory and processing bytecode and doing all the work of the actual underlying smart contracts. And you can think about it similar to the EVM, as you mentioned, which is doing the same thing for Ethereum. So you write your smart contract in a higher level language. On Algorand, it's something like Reach or Python. On Ethereum, it's something like Solidity or Viper. And then it gets compiled down, sent off to the corresponding virtual machines, and executed on chain. And so it's very, very similar. And in fact, if someone's familiar with EVM, just think about AVM as the same thing, but on Algorand. It is not quite the same thing, though. So we chose to build our own virtual machine rather than use something like EVM, which a number of other chains have done. They've just said, you know what, we'll just use EVM. It's already done. We made that decision for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted something that could really be tied really deeply into our underlying protocol. We operate at a particular speed, very fast. We operate at a particular cost, very cheap, and we have a slightly different model than Ethereum. And sort of trying to backport in the EVM, you can do it, but you end up doing some funny things. Like, for instance, well, this is my main chain, but I've got a separate chain that runs EVM, and it's a little bit different, but you can bridge between it. Like you end up sort of trying to do weird things. And when you make improvements to your underlying protocol, it might not be reflected in that smart contract platform because you've used somebody else's platform. And so we wanted something that was really sort of tied in with what we were doing and what we might do in the future. And so when I think about AVM and EVM, I'm thinking about our underlying differences. So we are faster, we are cheaper. Our smart contracts run at the same speed as everything else on our chain. They cost the same as a simple pay transaction, and yet have the same kind of power and ability to handle complex applications that you can build on Ethereum. That's how I think about the two.
Now, what is the difference between Algorand as a blockchain, the Algorand Foundation, and Algorand Inc.?
Yeah, so I mean, Algorand is a blockchain. This is the autonomous protocol that's running out there. So it is software and it's open source, and that's the protocol. Algorand Inc., we are the tech company that is responsible for shepherding the development of that protocol. So we are a pure tech company, and we build that software and some other stuff. The Algorand Foundation is responsible for everything about token economics, about governance, about the ecosystem. So that's kind of the split there. You've got the actual blockchain, a tech company that builds it, and the company responsible for economics, ecosystem, and governance.
Makes sense, and it's probably best to keep it separate like that. Now, what role does the Algorand Inc. have in furthering the adoption and development of the Algorand main chain?
Yeah, so and like I said, our role is all about the tech. So do we need better tools? Do we need better abstractions? Do we need better interfaces? Do we need more features? Do we need to provide more to the underlying users to help drive that adoption? Do I need to show people how to use the stuff, like creating the standards, creating example applications? All that around the technology is really what falls onto me and my team to make sure that we've got what a developer needs once they come to the Algorand ecosystem. And that's sort of like how we see ourselves fitting into that equation.
Now, here's a hot button topic that a lot of people in the community are wondering about. What exactly is a code chain, and how do they work in relation to the main chain?
Yeah, as much as I want to sort of tweak one of our great Twitter users here, I'll say this. So cochains are, think of it as a permission version of Algorand with sort of a built-in bidirectional bridge and some other special sauce to provide some interesting sort of capabilities there. You could see this being used for application, like as an application-specific blockchain, or by large institutions, governments, et cetera. They are in development. So there's no super secret like cochain project out there. They're in development now, and so on the details side, some of these details are still getting worked on, still getting worked out. But they're in development now. We expect that they'll be a really interesting sort of add to the ecosystem once we get them out to market. And I'll also say that making sure that there's that a value accrues to main chain is like a top level topic when we think about cochains. How do we make sure that value accrues back to the main chain and not just in some separate chain? And so that's a key design point as we work through it.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that answer.
Yeah.
So when a cochain creates an ASA, or an Algorand standard asset, is it automatically created on mainnet also, and how do the different cochains and main chain know that an ASA exists like elsewhere?
Yeah, so again, I'll say some of these details are still being worked through because this is in development, and some of them have been worked through, but we're sort of like holding it back for now as we sort of work through how we're going to position it and how we push it out to market and those kinds of things. So I probably won't dive into those details specifically, but that's a reasonable question to ask.
How does Algorand incentivize decentralization and node running without rewards? And is this something that could be changed over time?
Yeah, so I'd say first off, decentralization has a lot of different sort of like arms and axes in terms of like what do people mean when they say it. For instance, I believe that Algorand's inherent sort of technical design using VRFs is the most decentralization friendly design out there. But that's only one piece of the pie, right? So when we talk about node running specifically, our perspective is if you care about the technology, you care about securing the technology, then node running is it's a civic duty, right? Like this is your civic duty to give back to the protocol, is to run a node and help secure the protocol. We believe that creates better citizens and a more robust network than you would otherwise. Now, is it possible that we're going to add in financial rewards in the future? Sure, it's possible. And how would we do that? We'd do that the way we do anything else. It'd be, put into a release. Node runners would vote to take it or not take it, just like we do with every release. So definitely possible, not a focus currently though.
Now, if Algorand is open sourced, what prevents it from being able to be forked?
Yeah. So first off, it is open source, has been from the beginning. Yep. But here's what I'll say on this. Building, innovating, maintaining a blockchain is hard. It takes specialized skill and not just implementers, right? Like you need some academics too. It's algorithmic, it's theoretical. To really move it forward, you need a really specialized team. And it's not like, you can just be like, oh, hey, JT, like let's go run a blockchain. Right? It's like more complicated than that. And if you have that team of people, the odds are that team of people is like with anything else, like I don't want to use somebody else's thing. Like we're super smart. We've got the right skills. Let's do something that makes a lot of sense for us. And so you're going to build your own thing. Now, could you fork Algorand? Sure. But good luck keeping up with us if you do.
Fair enough. Okay, that's a fair enough. But I've heard Sylvia McCallie say it's mathematically almost
We're talking about
impossible.
different forking now.
Okay,
So
okay.
there's forking of the repo of the actual code.
Hmm.
There is and then there's like this concept of like a soft fork. So on blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana, when you there are multiple chains. So you get a block that comes out, and it could be the block, and so you build blocks on top of that block, and then there's two chains, competing chains, and then one is longer, and so you drop the shorter one and you go with the other one. Each time they're competing sort of like mini chains like that. It's called a soft fork. We do not soft fork. So if you see or the odds are 10 to the negative 18th that we will soft fork. If you see a transaction in a block, it is final. That's it. It will not be reverted. Whereas a number of these other chains, for different periods of time, your transaction could be in a block, but then the block gets reverted. So you're not really sure until you actually get to that finality. For us, if it's in a block, it's final. That's it.
Perfect. Now I've heard rumors that Algorand is adding a privacy layer. Is this true, and how would it work if it is true?
Yeah, so this is something we're definitely actively researching. I'm going to stay out of the details here, but I will say if you look across Algorand Inc. or the foundation, you're going to find a lot of folks who have super impressive reputations in the field of cryptography and the field of privacy. And frankly, I'm as excited as you are and the people listening are about what's going to come out of that.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time in the ecosystem for sure. Another exciting thing is the creator economy. That is absolutely booming currently. How does Algorand plan to continue to grow the creator economy and onboard more projects like LimeWire, A-Note Music, Opulus, and all the various NFT marketplaces that are building on Algorand?
Yeah. So from a technology perspective, so from my world, it's all about continuing to make it easier to use, to building out standards, to making sure the SDKs are there, to making sure that these projects can build what they need to build easily and in a safe way. In terms of the ecosystem, I know the foundation is highly focused here. In terms of the grants and making sure that we've got the funding available, and then pulling together the ecosystem projects so that it's not there's a project here and a project here and a project there, but it's that a single cohesive ecosystem where things are working together and making sure that we've got people tied together. I think is really the big focus.
Now, this next one's more of an opinion question, but there's a lot currently on the main chain. What are some projects on mainnet or currently building that intrigue you the most?
Ooh, okay. I'll do some deep cut. I'll try and do some deep cuts. Um, I think the Data History Museum, if you're familiar with those guys, is super interesting, just conceptually. So what they are doing is creating NFTs. So they've got some equipment. I'm going to screw up. I apologize, Data History Museum, if I screw this up for you. But they've got some equipment like seismology, seismic equipment, right? And when they see an earthquake, they will mint NFTs during the earthquake. And the NFTs got metadata around the earthquake and that kind of stuff. And that's at a really high level and sort of also weirdly at a low level what they're trying to do. So conceptually, why do I think this is cool? One of the things about NFTs is how do they tie? You've got some that don't tie to the real world at all, some that tie to something physical, and all of those ties tend to be hard. But this is giving a purely digital NFT tied to a concept or like a moment in time, and it's verifiable against that moment in time. So you can say with certainty that this NFT was created during the earthquake of X or during the event of Y. I think they have plans to go much broader than earthquakes. And I think that's a cool idea of being able to because for all collectibles, it's about the context for that collectible. It's not just about the collectible itself in the physical world and in the blockchain world. So I think what they're doing is cool. You mentioned LimeWire. Nimble Insurance is cool. Alandia is an interesting project I tweeted out, like last week. They're doing loans against NFTs. Non-fungible domains is coming out soon. They just got the test net. It's a big name service project. honestly, my biggest kick now, like the things that would get me most excited, is people tying together the ecosystem. When you think about blockchain ecosystems, sometimes you call DeFi money Legos, right? And they call them money Legos is because each thing you built is literally a Lego. You can use a Lego like that, or you can just pull, I guess not literally a Lego, but you can pull other Legos as well and create something new from stuff that other people built, right? And that's sort of like that's where I want to start seeing in our ecosystem is people thinking about these great projects that are getting built, not just as a great project, but also as a Lego that they can use in their project, and as a way that they can tie in. How do we add value to each other, and how do we make that happen? I'm really hot on seeing partnerships and sort of strung together applications to build something new, because it's not just about the individual applications, which are great. It's about the promise of tying them together.
I love that answer. Now, this next one's a little bit of a softball question, but a running theme in the community is the desire to see more leaders from the Foundation and Algorand Inc. on Twitter Spaces and YouTube videos such as these. Could we get you to lobby your friends at both the Foundation and Inc. to participate and engage the community a little bit more?
For sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll lobby him.
Awesome. I greatly appreciate that. That just about wraps it up for the questions I have. So let's move on to some of these community questions that are rolling in currently. We have Don65 asking, how do state proofs compare to what Flare Network is looking to provide?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
Unfortunately, I don't know the Flare Network.
That's
yeah.
I have the same exact response, so I just figured you might know more than I, but
I'm sure they're doing great work.
For sure, I'm sure they are. Now, here's another question from Don, actually. How many relay nodes are there on Algorand currently? Do you know? Or a rough estimate?
Yeah, it's something like 110, somewhere between 100 and 120. I should have that number off the top of my head. I apologize, Anya, who sends me those numbers. Somewhere between 100 and 120.
Makes sense. And the numbers that are portrayed on the Algorand metrics page, that combines the participation nodes and the relay nodes, correct?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, that does look like it wraps it up for the questions in the chat. If you do have a question while you're watching, feel free to throw it in the chat. Is there anything that I haven't asked or anything we haven't discussed yet that you'd like to bring attention to my audience?
Let's see. I think you definitely run through a bunch of questions. I see a couple more here in the comments that I can handle if you guys are up for it.
Here's one right here. What is the difference between centralized and decentralized applications? A lot of current dApps actually turn out to be centralized.
Yeah, so I think I'd need to see specific examples. The labels of centralization, decentralizations, they can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It could be everything from, you're pulling your data from a particularly centralized place. It could be, the like money management, the key management is centralized. It could be most of your logic is off chain versus in a smart contract. We'd have to get more nuanced on that. I apologize to IE, I think is the asker there.
And we do have one more that I missed, which I apologize for missing. It was towards the beginning. Let's see if I can find it. I don't know much about this, but maybe you will. Can you ask about the ISDA CDM partnership? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, ISDA. So we did a partnership a long time, close to launch time, which in this world is a long time ago. So like two and a half years ago with ISDA, and really what has slowed that down is less on us and more about actually getting to a standard. The idea was to use the ISDA standard, on the blockchain. And we've just been waiting for it to really sort of get to a place that it can be solidified enough. Originally, we wanted to do like a layer 1 primitive around this, but as everybody here probably knows, if you're going to do layer 1 primitives, it's got to be primitive, which means you've got like things aren't going to change at that sort of base level. In terms of building out the ISDA model with smart contracts, I mean that can be done now. Anybody can build out that model via our smart contracts. But for a layer 1 primitive, we need it to be just much more solid on their side in terms of the standard for us to think about putting it into the protocol.
Yeah, and actually, once you started speaking about it, I was like, oh, I actually do know about this, but at first the acronym didn't ring a bell. But for those that aren't aware, ISDA is the International Swaps and Derivatives Association, and by some estimates, the derivatives market globally is over $1 quadrillion. That's on the high end. I imagine it's probably a little lower than that, but that is a number that pops up a lot when you look into derivatives. Let's see, we've got one more rolling in. Any word on the Marshall Island SOV?
No, I don't have an update there. That project. So again, we're on the tech side. I'm not really involved in on the launches like that. I think that is, the Marshall Islands are trying to figure out what they want to do there and how they want to do it. But I don't have I don't have an update.
And Bilal tuning in. Hello, Bilal.
Bilal, what's up, Bilal?
He is asking, will state proofs work for proof of work blockchains to Algorand or just proof of stake?
Yeah, so state proofs are about making sure other blockchains can understand Algorand's state. So that means export, like think about it as exports from Algorand rather than imports to Algorand. Now, I can ask that same question of, hey, can you export to Ethereum, which is a proof of work blockchain? The answer would be yes. Can you export to Bitcoin? The answer is sort of like, not really. You need smart contracts to be able to verify the state proofs on the chain. So if you're using like RSK or Stacks or some other blockchain that does have smart contracts that is using Bitcoin for security, but not actually, it is not Bitcoin protocol themselves, then the answer is yes. You could do it via Stacks, or you could do it via RSK. But basically the requirement is there must be smart contracts on the other side so that you can verify the state proofs.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you answering all of my questions and all of the community questions. That wraps up for everything I have today. So if you don't have anything else that you'd like to add to the discussion, I'd just like to really thank you again for coming on and doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. And I love the questions from the audience. I appreciate it. And hopefully we got to everything that everybody wanted.
I hope so. Well, thanks again, Paul, and I'll happy to have you back on the show whenever you want.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thanks.
No problem. Take care, Paul.
Bye.
All right, everyone, I appreciate you all for staying to the end of this video. If you appreciate the time and effort it goes into planning these interviews, sourcing the questions and so forth, give me a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.